On today's episode of Stamp Your Mark, I'll be speaking to Tash Grossman. Founding Slip in 2021, she's leading the way in using data to create more informed and frictionless experiences for retailers and their customers. In that time, she's been named Techround's 29 Under 29 and won Retail Week Live's Data and Insight Prize. Tash shares her passion for getting more women into tech, how she's building her personal brand, and the reality of fundraising. It's an awesome episode, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So introducing Tash Grossman.
Fundraising was hard. Mm-hmm. We kind of set out to do a relatively big pre-seed. I was of the mindset of go big or go home, go raise almost £1 million, get enough to really prove that your product works in the market. So I probably spent 3 months full-time fundraising, wow. Which is intense because you take yourself away from the business. And, I know people doing seed and Series A rounds will say 3 months is nothing. We were just in a strategy day and someone was saying take 6 to do the next round. But you feel quite disconnected from your business when you're fundraising, which is difficult. Mm-hmm. So that was hard. And then I guess now it's just hiring. It's bringing on the right people to grow the team. And that's a scary thing.
Tash Grossman, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Really, really excited about this. So tell me about your day.
Okay, so my day has been good. I went boxing this morning with my co-founder. That was something new that we've never done together, and it was fun. A bit of boxercise. Then we actually went to see an office that we've decided that we're going to take, which is super exciting. The first Slip HQ. Mm-hmm. And then I went to where we're working now, did a couple of calls, and here I am.
Brilliant, love it. Why did you decide to go boxing?
I think that I haven't been giving myself enough time to do any exercise recently. So I asked Eddie, what do you want to do? And he said boxing. So we found a class and off we went.
Nice. Love that. I need to do more exercise as well. I don't have anyone to box with, so maybe I'll come to one of the sessions with you.
Come along.
Lovely. And what would you say you're most excited about right now?
I'm most excited about launching the product. I think that I assume you mean in business. I feel like
or life generally.
I feel like I don't have a life. I feel like business is life. But
no.
Product launch is super exciting. I think that will happen this quarter. So in the next kind of 90 days. I think that when you've been thinking about something for such a long time, to actually see it come to fruition and be able to swipe on it on your phone is a really exciting milestone. So yeah, that's what I'm most excited for.
Love that. So I'm going to ask you loads of questions about the business. We're going to hit all the juice. But I want to pick up on something that you said, which was that you feel like you don't have a life outside of work at the moment. And that speaks to me on a spiritual level. So why is it that you said that?
Well, I don't think I mind. I think that I was answering a question the other day around work-life balance. And when you're a founder, your work is life, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'll give an example. If I went out for drinks 6 months ago or a year ago and someone said, what did you do? I would have said, I'm a management consultant. Oh, where'd you do that? Gate 1. Cool. That's the end of the conversation. But if you go out for drinks now and someone says, what do you do? And you say, I'm a startup founder. If they just said, cool, it just doesn't happen. People are so interested in what you're doing and it's so different to the ordinary. So naturally I'd go home for dinner and instead of saying, which friend did you see this week? It's which investor did you talk to? And that's fine because I like the fact it's all consuming because it gives me adrenaline. And I think that as a founder, you have to be fully in it. Now, obviously it's important to have a bit of a work-life balance and go to the gym and, not stare at your laptop 24/7. But it's fine if it's all you're thinking about. And I think there's a bit of a negative stigma around, you've got to have, the most amazing work-life balance, but you've also got to put in the hours and the effort at the start for it to pay off in the end.
Completely agree. Do you like speaking about the business?
Oh, I love it.
It's so much fun, isn't it?
I'm my happiest because I'm just thinking it's mine. It's my baby. It's the same as if you had a child, you'd walk around parading them and say, hey, everyone, this is my baby. So yeah, it's my baby.
I hear all of that. I love it. I agree. I think I'm reaching a point now, 4 years in, where I'm thinking, okay, shit. Is this a little bit too much? And I'm seeing all these motivational quotes. And one of them is just, simple reminder, you don't take any of it with you. And I was like, oh God, stop atting me in this way. And it just made me think my whole life, everything right now is a business. And I've had to actively sacrifice my social life, my family life at times as well. And it's getting to the point now where I recognize how much I love the business, but I'm also starting to think about future me and whether or not I'm going to be pleased about the decisions I made at this age. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, look, I think when you're at the very start, you have to put in 110% effort. There's no shortcuts. It's also around once you start bringing people into the organization, you're the example. And I don't think that would be different in a big organization. I think that if I was working at a consultancy and the managing partner, was skiving off work, always out for lunch, never actually working or doing anything, you as employees would feel, what am I doing here? So I think that when you want to be a people-based business and you want to hire good people, you have to be setting a good example. And that good example isn't necessarily working 100 hours a week. That's not a good example. A good example is showing that you are so passionate about the business and you will go above and beyond to do it. So I think that as long as you're doing that, that's the most important thing. And I'm very much the type of person that could probably get more done in 2 hours than most people because I focus. So I think that there's a lot of people that probably work 100 hours a week and feel like, oh, I'm doing so much. And you've got someone else who does 40 hours a week, but is probably as productive. So I think that it's around finding a balance. I think, in your position, you just have to think, what would, my staff think of me? How would I think of me?
Yeah.
And find what works for you. But you're not exactly doing too badly, so I wouldn't complain.
But all of that's really interesting because we've got the amount of hours that we're working, but then it's also the type of work we're doing within those hours. So I think about some of my friends, and one of them is doing incredibly well for himself, but he never ever finishes his day before midnight. It's more typical that he'd end his day in the office at 2 or 3 a.m. And so in the way that we see lunch as part of the day, like we pop out, we grab a sandwich, come back, that's how they see dinner every single night. It's just, that's part of his life. It's been that way for ages. And I thought about that recently when I was very much up against it at work. And I just thought, how can somebody do this for longer? And then I had a conversation with him and we discussed it's different types of work. There are some pieces of work which just need you to put in the hours, some bits of admin which you can't delegate elsewhere. You just have to do them yourself. But then there's other bits of work which is just a constant tug on your mental and emotional capacity. And so by the end of the day, sometimes you feel way more exhausted. Do you feel that?
Yeah, no, totally. I think that there's the mundane stuff for sure. And that's typically the stuff that you write on your to-do list every day and it always gets pushed to the next day. It's like, I didn't have time to do that spreadsheet. But yeah, I think that I would much rather spend, like you're saying, the example of your friend, I would much rather be doing that for myself than for anyone else. And I think that that's the difference of being a founder, is that if you were working till 2 a.m. every day, you don't mind because you're fulfilling your purpose and doing what you set out to do. So I think that it's important to know when to delegate and to try and not, be up till 2, 3 a.m. doing spreadsheets, but also recognizing that it's okay to do it sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just got to be done.
Got to be done.
Because if you're the one pushing the business and you're not going to really push it, then no one else will.
Exactly.
So tell me about Slip.
I guess start from the beginning, the light bulb moment that people like to say. So in all honesty, it was a bit of a light bulb moment. I was in Zara, which is a scene that's pretty familiar, go far too much. And I was on date number 3 with my now boyfriend. And I said to him, hey, Alex, do you mind just quickly coming into Zara with me? I've got a pair of trousers that I need to exchange. It will only take 5 minutes. Lo and behold, in the queue for half an hour, get to the front. I said to the guys, here's the trousers, they're broken, the buckle's fallen off. Can I exchange them for a new pair? And they said, no, you've lost your receipt, there's nothing you can do. So Alex, feeling, polite, was like, do you want me to buy you the new pair? I was like, no, don't you dare. This is ridiculous. It's still got the label on. I was furious and walked out, super embarrassed, and then thought to myself, surely there's a better way. And that was really how it began. Then I was working at a consultancy that had an incubator, and it was this idea that everyone should be able to work on a startup whilst they're working, and companies that don't allow people to do that aren't embracing their creativity. So I went, and that was the idea, that was the problem I wanted to solve. Did quite a lot of research, found out that the only innovation for the last 10 years in this space was email receipts, which is awful process. Who enjoys standing at the till and spelling out their email address. I think about my friends at school whose email address was like funkyfriends@hotmail.com. You know, that's just so embarrassing. And yeah, I researched it, found that it is an actual problem. And February last year, entered a competition, spoke about it, got to a final 5 and thought, you know, I've got to do something with this. This is something. And then I went through an accelerator program, started working in the business part-time, then full-time. And here I am today.
Brilliant.
Living it.
Living it large.
Living it large.
And so how would you describe what the business actually does?
So what Slip is software that sits in a retailer's till system. So at the point of a transaction where a receipt would typically be printed or emailed, I would show them my slip code, which is agnostic to every retailer I shop at. They would scan it and instantly in real time, I'd get all my offers, rewards, loyalty points, and receipt for that specific retailer. As a customer, I can view all of my receipts in one place, you know, no more paper on the floor and stuff in the kitchen drawer, as we like to call it. And then for retailers, it's all around understanding their customers better. You know, who is Joe? Not specifically who are you, but that would definitely be against GDPR. But what do you as a customer like, and how can we enhance your customer experience knowing what you buy online and offline?
Brilliant. And so you mentioned loyalty cards there as well. Does that mean we're going to yeet the paper loyalty cards, which you have to get a stamp on?
Yeah, I think where we focus is typically in retailers that don't have loyalty programs. So your fast fashion, your health and beauty, your homeware. But a lot of those places do have more like membership clubs and loyalty programs. So it's all around digitizing everything and in one scan. You know, even now I go into a retailer, I've got to then pay, then get out my loyalty card, then give them my email address for an email receipt. And ideally, we want to put all of that into just one tap process.
I think it's brilliant. And I understand you're coming at this from a non-tech founder perspective.
Yeah.
That sounds scary. Tell me about that.
Do you know what it was? It was this time last year, before I started the Founder Institute Accelerator Program, I said to myself, there are 2 things I've got to do if I'm going to take this to the next level. I have to go on an accelerator program because I've got no idea how to start. But more importantly, I have to find a tech co-founder, because although I understand technology from a strategic level, because I was doing tech strategy consulting, I don't know how to code, and it's, you know, a different game. And I was working with retailers and I was seeing the kind of procurement supplier process that you'd have to go to get tech in a retailer. So I knew it had to be, you know, top notch. And then I found Eddie. So Eddie, we had some mutual friends. I know his brother. I pitched to him one Saturday afternoon near Hampstead Heath. He was like, yeah, I quite like it. And then about 6 months later, I said, well, you said you quite liked it, looking for a tech co-founder. What do you think? And then he kind of got on board and started working on it in kind of his free time and now full time, which is great.
Wow. And does it scare you at all being a non-tech founder, even though you've got the co-founder there with you?
No, because I understand tech. Like, I don't know how to code, but I do understand things around product management, tech strategy, GDPR, all the main technical components. Now, if I was sitting in a room with a retail IT director, I probably wouldn't know enough, but that's where mine and Eddie's relationship is really good, because he teaches me, and we try not to make tech and business so separate, which I think is very easy to do, especially when you're outsourcing your tech to not really understand what your product is. But no, I think that I'm not scared by it. I think there's a lot on the non-technical side to champion on, so all good.
Okay. Brilliant. And how is it all going so far? What's the real juice? How is it?
Okay, it's good. It's challenging. Fundraising was hard. We kind of set out to do a relatively big pre-seed. I was of the mindset of go big or go home, go raise almost £1 million, get enough to really prove that your product works in the market. So I probably spent 3 months full-time fundraising, which is intense because you take yourself away from the business. And, I know people doing seed and Series A rounds will say 3 months is nothing. We were just in a strategy day and someone was saying take 6 to do the next round. But you feel quite disconnected from your business when you're fundraising, which is difficult. So that was hard. And then I guess now it's just hiring. It's bringing on the right people to grow the team. And that's a scary thing.
How difficult was fundraising? Were there a lot of no's?
A lot of no's. And, being totally transparent, it was really the first time I ever got no's. I did well at school, had an unconditional offer at uni, had my job at KPMG lined up. You know, I'd applied for a job at McKinsey and they said no, and I cried for about 2 weeks.
Right.
On reflection, I am so not a McKinsey person, but I then had my job, then I got my other job. So I really, you know, floated through school and education without no's. So I didn't think I was a resilient person at the start. You know, I was so offended that the first no, I got into my bed and I cried.
So what happened? Did you receive this no over a phone call? Was it in person? Was it over an email? And what was your response as you read it? Did you call someone? Did you think about it?
Well, do you know what it was? I think the first no we really got when it came to fundraising was when we applied for the Innovate UK grant. And I was reading the feedback and I was so annoyed because they never met me. I was like, why couldn't I have pitched it to you rather than reading an application?
Yeah.
And that I got really upset by, because I think there was a lot of hype around getting the grant and we were actually super close, but just one assessor just didn't understand it. And it was more frustrating than sadness. But then my first investor rejection, I just took it so personally. I just thought, why don't they want to invest in me? Because everyone tells you that at the start they're investing in you, they're investing in the founder. So then it's very hard to detach yourself and not take it personally, even though they've said all the reasons are because of the business model. But I read a lot of books around it, around kind of resilience and rejection as a founder. And actually the most important thing is to turn those negatives into positive learning experiences, understand why that person said no, so that you can make sure when you go into the next conversation, you're already bringing it up as a, you may think this, but actually we've already got it covered.
And so what did the 5th, 6th and 7th rejection look like? Were they easy? Did they still feel a little bit personal?
I wouldn't say it ever gets easy. I think that in my accelerator program, they use this expression, which I love, is that no one will tell you your baby's ugly, right? And to explain, I don't know if you've heard it before, but most babies aren't cute.
They just aren't. I'm so glad somebody said it.
It's just a fact. But when they're your baby or your cousin or your niece or your nephew, they are adorable. Yeah. Right? But no one would ever turn around to a mother and say your baby's not cute. And that's really what being a startup founder is. You have this idea, it's your baby, and your friends and family are going to tell you it's amazing and it's brilliant. And even, you know, your controversial cousin will tell you it's great. So then to be told that your baby is ugly, you've got to take it. You've got to take it personally. Yeah. But then you realize that actually, in the same way that, you know, there are people out there that would admit a baby's ugly, there are people out there that will say your startup's not great. So you just have to take it on the chin and just move on. You will find people, and you read the horror stories about people saying no to Uber and Airbnb, and you're like, no, I'm not that special. Yeah, I think Gary Vaynerchuk has that framed. He said no to Uber. He's now got that framed in his office and he raves about it the whole time. It's like, it was a learning for me. Yeah. It was a learning. It's like, okay, nice. I heard about an investor, I can't remember which one, they have on their portfolio page on their website all the list of companies that are unicorns that they rejected, and I love that. I love that transparency. It's like, we said no. It's great. That's wicked. I like that. And I love the comparison about the ugly babies, because it's just so true. But then hearing that for the first time, when you're surrounded by yes men and everyone's like, yeah, it's great, and then you have somebody just say it really directly, whether it's, you know, couched within some nice fluff or whether it's just to the point, it's still a different type of sentiment. And it hurts, especially when it feels personal. So I didn't have it from the investor perspective, but I've got it from the client perspective, from the potential team members who then don't end up joining and they share their reasons. And it can always feel that way. But I think it's so much nicer long-term to actually give that to other people. And, you know, I've shared feedback with people recently where I felt horrible doing so, but I realized, like, if you can, you know, if you respect somebody enough, then you'll put yourself in the uncomfortable position of giving them the feedback that they really need to hear to progress in their career. Yeah. And so I think it's really similar in this case. 100%. Yeah. But eventually you got to the yes, which is brilliant. Yeah. So that's really exciting. Yeah. So we closed our round, I guess if you say closed around back in February, there was a lot of legal yo-yoing. But yeah, it's all done. And the VC that led the round, they're kind of backgrounds in retail, which also feels great because it shows that they get the product probably more than most. And we had some great angels come in. So yeah, it's super exciting. Nice. Now I can just get on with it. What was the legal yo-yoing like? Was it a nightmare? I think so, because as a person, I get anxious when things are out of my control. I like to be in control. I always have. So the fact that I couldn't control how quickly their lawyers were going to reply or what our lawyers were saying, because I didn't understand, half of the words in the contract, that made me feel, quite on edge, quite anxious. But I guess my lawyers gave me really good reassurance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got to give them credit for that.
So help me understand what that legal landscape looks like for you. Because for me, we have three types of contracts. It's contracts for employees, contracts for clients, and then NDAs essentially, or kind of short-term contracts for contractors.
Yeah.
But in your case, you've got people who own equity in the business. You've got co-founders who have kind of equity options, and then potentially a wider option pool. You've got investors, accelerate, all of that jazz. So what are the different components?
Yeah, so I think when you're raising, you have an investor agreement, a shareholders agreement that all kind of encompass all of that stuff. So that's why they're quite complicated. Like our documents were 50, 60 pages long. And most of the stuff I didn't understand, but it's all there to protect you as founders. I think you often hear these expression of founder-friendly legal agreements, because you can sometimes get investors that just want the best for them and don't actually think about the founders. But then as founders, you're not going to accept that. So the legal yo-yoing is, we want this, we want that, you get this, you get that type of stuff, as you would happen in any kind of legal arrangement. But no, got there in the end.
Got it. Good stuff. And on hiring, what's that looking like? How many of you are there at the moment?
So 3. We've just given someone a job offer, and we're hiring another one at the moment, and then looking to kind of hire a growth marketer in the next couple of months. I think my biggest challenge has been a diversity thing, that when you're growing a tech company, you expect the people applying for the job and reaching out for the job to be guys. And that's a real challenge for me, that I'm a female founder and I want to have a really diverse team. But when you're recruiting engineers, it's almost impossible.
Right.
I downloaded LinkedIn Recruiter and I put in my search, as a recruiter would do. And I go through 5-6 pages worth of people, hundreds of candidates, and see 2 or 3 women. And it's difficult because you want to build a team that's diverse and inclusive. And I want to know when the most amazing female engineer comes along, she's going to look at my team and think, that's something I want to be a part of.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the challenge I'm finding at the moment in terms of quality of candidates. They're pretty good. I think that, there was the Great Resignation. People are looking for jobs that are fulfilling. I think people like the idea of working in a startup and really being part of something great and something big. I had people with 10, 12 years experience at Goldman Sachs applying for my entry-level job, and I was just flattered that they felt that was something that they would even consider.
Yeah. Have you learned anything specific from the hiring process so far?
Yeah, I've learned to be really transparent about what it is I'm looking for and who it is that I am, and what type of company I want to build. I think that's really important. I think that the biggest mistake as a founder you could do is make out that something's going to be better than it is or worse than it is, and just not be really transparent about your expectations. And I found that in doing that, you get better quality candidates because you're really aligned from the outset around what it is that you're striving to achieve.
Absolutely. And on the diversity point, I definitely hear that. It's difficult, in media as well. There's a typical kind of profile, which we don't want to build a company of the same type of person. It just doesn't make sense or work. We just don't want that. So have you found any kind of avenues to improve the situation for your business? Yeah,
so I find, there are a lot of organizations that are encouraging women in tech. And I actually found when I reached out to the female candidates and explained that I'm the female founder and I really want a tech team full of women, I got better responses than my co-founder did, because I think that the female engineers respected what I was doing and why I want to build a diverse tech team. So whereas I reached out to 10 women and got 4 replies, he reached out to 10 and got 1. So it does just show that women respect women, and we're all kind of in it together, wanting to strive for a better tomorrow, as we call it.
Love that. And so as a whole, would you say the hiring process is proving to be more or less challenging than you expected?
I think around the same. I think that I spoke to tons of other founders before I started around it, and the do's, the don'ts, etc. So I think that it's definitely challenging in the sense that you want to make sure the people you're bringing into the team are amazing. But on the other on the other flip side to that, you also can't be too picky, because if you're too picky, you'll lose out on good candidates that, you were just being too blind to see. So I definitely found that bringing other people into the interview process, whether that's my co-founder or one of our advisors, has really helped, because it's not just my opinion that matters.
Yeah. I did that in the earlier days when we were starting to hire people. I would always have one of our advisors have like a final stage chat almost. And it was wild what they were able to do. They were able to have a half an hour conversation or 20-minute FaceTime with somebody, and then basically share it almost like a prediction of what they think this person would be like. And it's always been correct. And I just think, how the hell can you get that from, 20 minutes of conversation? How can you tell that somebody's going to probably stay with the business for X amount of time, or is probably going to be really great at some stuff, but it's definitely going to lack in? It just completely blew my mind.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so being able to watch those people do that as well has then enabled me to think more critically, because a lot of it is about reading between the lines. Everyone's going to give a good answer in an interview, but it's how can you kind of really understand the person, really get what's driving them, and so on.
Yeah, I love it when people join an interview in a shirt and tie as well for a startup.
Yeah.
I always feel the underdressed one.
No, exactly. So I'm going to read out something that you said in a recent interview. You said, "I kid you not, I've been on an email chain that was meant to be an introduction, but the men were going back and forth discussing the need to catch up over a round of golf." My first thought there was, first of all, love that. Second of all, like, RIP those guys seeing that interview and thinking, oh shit, she's talking about me. So what was the whole kind of premise around that?
Yeah, to be honest, that one was an investor wanting to introduce me to someone, introducing me via email, and then like 3 or 4 emails went back between them just discussing, oh, see you on the golf course, when are you next in, that type of thing. And I just laughed, because I think that as a female founder, when you're talking about raising capital, the golf club is such a common, joke. I've met so many male investors where I said, oh, how do you know this person? Golf. How do you know this person? Members club. How do you know this one? Golf. So it was one of those things I just couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe that I was actually in a situation watching the golf discussion. Right. It was funny. I like to joke about it now, because I was there. I saw it happen. It's real. It's not a joke.
And you said, you're lucky enough to not find these situations intimidating.
Yeah.
And the wider situations of kind of, being a female founder in a world dominated by men and male investors. So help me understand a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think I've always been a very confident person. And I think that has massively helped. I can understand how situations can be super intimidating, but I think that I like to challenge people. I was once at an event, and it was a pitch event, and there were 4 companies pitching, and every single one of them was a male or 2 male founders. So I went up to the fund manager at the end and I said, great diversity tonight, as a joke. But, well, it wasn't a joke. I wanted to challenge him, and I wanted him to know that I'm the type of person that will challenge you. And he said, oh, you're so right. 2 female founders dropped out. Whether or not he was telling the truth is another thing. But I think that I can understand why people find it intimidating. It's not comfortable, but I think that having quite a lot of self-assurance helps in these situations to not find them intimidating.
But where does that come from? Is that your upbringing? Is that resilience that has built up over time?
Maybe my upbringing. I've just always been a really confident person. I've always been, the one to want to take charge in a group. The first one to do everything. I love work. It's so weird. I joke that I was doing internships when I was like 12. I just have always wanted to be in the corporate world doing corporate things.
Yeah.
So I'm a weirdo like that.
But so what advice would you give then to somebody who struggles with confidence and would be intimidated in situations like that?
Yeah, I think it's just know your worth, really understand what your value is that you can bring to the room, and go for it. You know that you have value, you know that you have an opinion that's worth hearing, so shout about it. And the worst that something can happen is someone ignores you, and then you're in the exact same position than you are now. I've always loved that type of mindset. I remember, it's no different if my friends were going on a date. I'd say, well, go, what's the worst that could happen? You're in the same situation and you don't know them after. And it's the same with being a founder, I think.
It's a good way of looking at it. And so who are the people out there who you really admire and look up to?
Yeah. So it's a weird one, because someone asked me this the other day. Someone said to me, where do you get this, entrepreneurial spirit from? And I think that it's my dad. And my dad has by no means a luxurious job. He works in our family business that is in the meat industry and has done since he was 16. But growing up, my dad would go to work at 5 o'clock in the morning and he'd come back at 7, 8 p.m. at night. And I wouldn't see him so much because he was out, but everything that he was doing was always for us. And it was always around, hard work, providing for your family, doing your bit, and working with his family as well, which he's always loved. And I think that naturally being exposed to that has made me also want to work hard, not necessarily go up at 5 a.m. and stand in a chicken factory, but the same, value of hard work, definitely from my parents. And then I think I've always had role models. I've always loved being mentored. I have amazing mentors who are insane women who really push me, which is so important.
Are there any examples you can share? Any people you can mention?
Yeah, so I have a mentor who's actually one of my old clients. She's at Tesco. And I, from the day I met her, I've just admired her leadership strategy, like the way people have so much respect for her. And she can walk into a room and everyone knows that whatever she says is going to be valuable. So post leaving, I said to her, will you be my mentor? And she, we catch up every couple of months. She shares me really, really great advice. But I think that my first mentor, Laura, she actually now has her own business, and it's really weird. We've gone in the same path, and she was the first person that ever told me, go and be a management consultant, you'll love it.
Right.
So I've always had mentors, and I've always, really enjoyed the value that they can bring.
Do you have advice on finding a mentor? Because I've asked people this before, and sometimes the answers are a bit kind of fluffy and not so to the point, but do you have any kind of direct, here's what you need to do to find a mentor who's actually going to care about you and help you with your career growth? Yeah,
so I think find the things that you lack and what that person has. So if you're lacking confidence, find a confident person. If you're lacking, drive, find a driven person and just ask them. I think that people underestimate how flattering it is to be asked to be a mentor. I don't know if you have ever been asked, but I was once asked if I would mentor someone. She was at uni and I was so flattered. And rarely they'll say no unless they're so busy. And if they are, they'll probably guide you to somewhere else. So my advice would just be, just ask.
Yeah, I like that. And I would agree. It's a nice feeling when somebody asks that, because it's like they clearly recognize that you've done the things that they want to do. And also I think that the vast majority of people can be a mentor to somebody. Even if, you've just started university, there are hundreds of thousands of people who want to go to university and are struggling to write their personal statement. So there's always, the ability to look back a year or 2 or 3 years and think, okay, I've been through that. I understand what that feels like, and I can almost coach somebody, or at the very minimum, tell them, I get how you feel. I've been there. It's tough. And even that sometimes can be enough for somebody to kind of give them confidence and let them know that what they're feeling is normal.
Yeah, there's also a difference between coaching and mentoring, which I learned because I had a coach and a mentor at the same time. A mentor will tell you what to do. They'll say, I was in this situation, you should do this. This is my advice. A coach just asks you questions. They really challenge you to think, what is it that you want to do? What are your goals? How are you going to get there? And it's a bit more probing, but I think there's value in having both.
Yeah. Is there anything you've seen online within the space of entrepreneurship which you just think is just absolute bullshit?
In a good bullshit way or a bad bullshit way?
Or a bad bullshit way. Like, we touched on this idea of kind of self-care, and we didn't use the term bullshit because self-care there's nothing bullshit about it, but there's a wider narrative of, you need to take all of this time out for yourself, or you need to never work on weekends. But then there's also a reality, and there's a very select group of people who are going to talk about the reality. And the reality, as you said, of building a business in the first year is, one, you didn't say this, but it's probably going to feel like a shit show a lot of the time. There are going to be a ton of rejections. There will be moments of high, which will be great, but there will also be a lot of long low periods. And also, you're going to have to put in the hours, whether that's late, hours on the weeknights or full days on the weekends. It's just a reality to doing it, but people don't really talk about that. So the wider glossy narrative is, start a business, it's going to be amazing, everyone can do it, you can do it, but the reality is different. So I wonder if there's anything else you've seen that you just think, bullshit.
Yeah, well, the first one that comes to mind is when investors post a type form and say, we are we are, looking for X amount of businesses apply here, they are never going to read that. They are literally only going to take, your company on if you got a warm introduction. So unless you are 100% certain that you are going to read every single one of the applications that comes through, don't do it. Don't waste a founder's time. I had countless amount of times where I applied via a form and then got reached out to because I got introduced. And my business was exactly the same as the one I submitted through the type form, but they'd never read it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do that, please, if there's any investors listening, please commit to actually reading them, because firstly, you'll miss out on really good deal flow if you don't. But secondly, you're wasting a founder's hour where they could be speaking to someone that does actually care. So that's probably the biggest bullshit thing that I see on LinkedIn most days.
I love it. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
I think there's a lot of haters on LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn a lot. I like you on LinkedIn.
Thanks.
You're my LinkedIn influencer friend. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of people that, spread hate on it. I think that I saw a post earlier today of someone sharing, really negative comments that they had on their LinkedIn. It's meant to be almost like Facebook, but for your personal life, and you're allowed to self-promote, and you should self-promote. And then there's people that just are haters. So I just think in the same way that we ban trolls on Instagram and Facebook, we should do the same on LinkedIn.
Just yeet them out straight away.
Yeah. Didn't you get loads of negative? Because when you're talking about your weekend work, I remember your little one that you did. And so people were just writing such unnecessary comments.
Yeah, people were really coming for me. I was just chilling there. I was working. It happened to be a Saturday, and I was very mindful of the fact that it was a Saturday and I just had to get this shit done. And I was like, you know what? How about we just write a nice little LinkedIn post? So I did that. And I said, excuse me, hi, sorry, to the stranger who walked past. And I said, would you mind taking a photo of me? Which is a classic. I love doing that. And she took a photo of me, boom, put it onto LinkedIn. And then 8,000 likes, 1 million views later, and a ton of messages in my DMs basically saying, oh, you're glamorizing overworking and you're going to hit burnout and good luck when you hit burnout. I was like, oh, go home. Go home, basically. It's just come on, this is what it actually looks like. And yeah, there are, we've had a lot of highs that we've shared and I've shared on behalf of the business recently. But you've got to be honest. I think you've got to be honest, and you've got to share the reality as well. Talk to me about your content. I like your content on LinkedIn. You've been doing Founder Fridays where you shout out specific people who impress you and who you, whose businesses you like the look of. What was the inspiration behind that?
The inspiration behind that was I was actually on a call. The first person I did was a guy called Matthew, as a business called Jumpstart. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's all around getting grads, giving them some training and placing them in startups. And I love the whole mindset behind that when you're a graduate, you don't know that going to work in a startup is really an option. You have to go and be an accountant or have to go and be a consultant or a lawyer. That was at least what I felt like. So I really loved what he was doing, and I just wanted to tell as many people about it as possible. And I thought, well, why don't I, share it? And then week on week, I have an amazing founder network of people. I probably speak to founders more than I speak to my friends. The founders aren't my friends now, but you know what I mean? And I just felt like, why not use this platform that I'm building up to start talking about other businesses and share things that I've seen that I like. And I enjoy doing it because I think that, if I could share someone else's business and it impacts one other person, then I've done a good job.
Yeah, for sure. It's a nice approach. It also makes you look good as someone who's raising other people up.
Yeah.
Talking about your other content, because you share content a lot, I think in the past year. I don't think you had posted much before that.
No.
Or at all.
No.
But I wasn't sure if my LinkedIn just wasn't refreshing. I was trying to scroll back.
You're correct.
So, from no content to now, you've got themes. There's almost, there is content pillars in your content.
Yeah.
So there's a clear structure, which means there's clear thinking behind it.
Yeah.
So what is the overarching goal of this? Are you building up your profile so that you can kind of leverage your personal brand as an asset for Slip? Are you doing it to help with inbound hiring? What's the purpose?
I think a mixture of both of those things that you said, but I think also just to add value. The best thing around following someone on LinkedIn, I can connect with people that I know, but I follow people that I feel like they add value, and I'm going to learn something from seeing their posts, or I'm going to see something that I wouldn't have known before. So I think that a lot of my posts are obviously, personal branding and that. that space very well. But I think that it's all around how can I add value to the people in my network? How can I tell them about something that they wouldn't have known yesterday? And how can I take some content, digest it, and then share it? So, if I see an interesting retail report, I know that people don't want to read 50 pages of it, but what are the top 3 things that I liked about it? And just sharing that.
Yeah, that's great. And also, I mean, you share photos of yourself and you're quite, you approach it in the same way I would. When there's a win, we talk about the win.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people just don't want to do that. They think it's going to look boastful or braggy, and they don't want to be that guy or that girl.
Yeah.
But what's your view on it?
Well, if it's your birthday on Facebook, back in the day, everyone would write on your wall. And when someone gets engaged, the first thing they do now is post it on Instagram. Why are you doing that? Because you're boasting about it. Something great in your life has happened and you want to tell the world about it. Yep. So why should we not do the same in our professional lives? People are very quick to update their LinkedIn when they've had a promotion at work and get, loads of those generic congrats, you're smashing it, all those messages from all their friends. So why not do the same when you're a founder? Why not tell your network about the great stuff that's happening? You do it on your Instagram, so tell your professional network.
Completely agree. And also, again, I think you mentioned this earlier, what's the worst that can happen? What is the literal worst that happens if you share an achievement on yours on LinkedIn? The worst that happens is it gets screenshot and put into your WhatsApp group with all your friends and people take the piss. But then after that, it's like, okay, well, now what? No client, no partner is going to see that and think, oh, wow, this person's arrogant and I'm going to pull our contract. It just doesn't happen.
No.
So I think there's a level of kind of fear that people get over. And once they've got over that, they're like, oh shit, wow, this really works. If I can frame this as an achievement, even the classic, I'm delighted to announce, I'm thrilled to share, then it, you create that moment and other people see that and they respond well to it exactly like they would if it's a birthday or if it's a, gorgeous girl who's getting engaged. That classic Instagram story like this with the hands up, showing the ring. Like people respond to that. Of course they would. It's a huge moment. So I love the comparison there.
Yeah.
Who do you think does it well in terms of personal branding on LinkedIn?
Well, I'd just be so mean not to say you.
Oh no, you don't need to say me. It wasn't a question like that.
No, but I think that you do. I think Molly from Flexer, she does it brilliantly.
Yeah,
she speaks about stuff really, really well. I think Nick Towson's content's really great. The guys from Play 2A do really good content. And I think it's just around doing stuff that's in your space where you're doing value add. I think that's really important, and how you can, increase the value that you're bringing to a network.
Yeah.
And I would go as far as saying I think I'm doing it well. If I can say that about myself. I've seen people that I haven't seen for years, and they tell me they love my Founder Friday, and I feel like that's amazing. I've told that person about businesses that they would never have heard about, and that probably made me feel as happy as it would if someone saying Slip's a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. There are kind of moments when you know that what you're doing is working, and it's when people you haven't seen for ages mention it, like you have been on their mind, and you weren't even aware.
Yeah.
But so then when you walk into a room full of potential future hires or investors or partners, they already know who you are, and that helps so much.
So much.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful thing to do. There's one interesting thing about posting content on LinkedIn, which is there is a natural, I think the actual word is inertia. When something takes a long time to kind of mature, you need to leave time. But I do think you have to leave certain space for certain types of content. For example, if you have a learning after, somebody who's just rejected your job offer, it's pretty insensitive to post it there and then. But it can make for great content down the line. So I did something recently on an interview, which was just, I shared content about an interview from an employer's perspective, but that interview was close to a year ago. You've got to be really conscious of what you share and when, because there's a time when it's okay and a time when it could cause you problems as well.
Definitely.
I want to ask a question that, we ask everyone close to the end of each podcast, which is about legacy. The podcast is called Stamp Your Mark. It's all about leaving a positive mark on the world. So what is your legacy? What are you hoping for it to be?
Yeah, so I mentioned to you before we started recording that I thought about this because I was listening to the other episodes the other day on a drive, and I wanted to think around what mine was. And I think I want my kids to be proud of me. I think that I want them to look at me and think, I'm really proud of my mum. I want to tell my friends about her. I want to tell my colleagues about her. She's an inspiration. And I think that it's very easy when you're doing stuff just to focus on yourself. But actually, when we're thinking around legacy, it's what are my kids going to think about me? Are they going to think I'm a good role model?
Yeah.
And that for me is, the thing that I want my kids to think. My mum's a queen.
My mum's a queen. My mum's the queen. Love
The
it.
queen.
Wonderful answer and brilliant episode. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.